Hey, before we can really go any farther, we have to get a power situation worked out here. So, it turns out I got two outlets here. These are dedicated to the kitchen alone. So the only thing running off these is actually the microwave that they got plugged into it. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to tap into this and make a switch for the garbage disposal. And then I'm going to run a separate circuit from the breaker box and run some power in here. So I've got about 12 inches of space that we're going to make a little cabinet of some kind here. So I'm going to run the power probably over in this corner, and this is where I'm going to put my junction box somewhere in here. And it looks like, so I got the breaker box right here. I go straight down there through the access panel so I can run my wires straight down and go underneath and directly over. So it shouldn't be a very difficult run. So that's the next part I'm going to start on here. The thing I want to do is take the wall panel off, which is pretty self-explanatory. Just take off the screws. As we can see, there is room for a couple more breakers, so I can put the dishwasher on its own circuit. And the reason I need to do that is I looked up online and it draws close to 10 amps, which means we need at least a 15 amp circuit and probably a 20 if something else needed to run off that circuit later down the road. Anyways, it's something that draws that much amps. It's probably good to have being on its own dedicated circuit. So what I was hoping to do was be able to fish a wire down here. See where this hole is? You can see there's a space. Anyways, that's where I'll be able to run down directly to the floor joist. But all this looks pretty full, so I'm either going to have to cram another wire in there or actually drill another hole through it. So that's the first little hang up on this project. And generally, it's a good idea. If I'm working in these things, a lot of times I like to shut the main breakers off if you can, just so I don't shock myself, which I do quite often. And in this busy little box here is lucky enough to find one more knockout right there. So I'm going to knock that guy out. I just take a hammer and my screwdriver to knock him out. So I just did what the last guy did over here. This is just dig a little hole out, since the panel, the face panel will cover that, so I can get my clamp under there. In case you're wondering how I'm going to get the nut on there, I'm just using a pair of needle nose pliers here to get them under there. There you can see now I'm just going to put the nut on with my other hand. Of course, is to have the screws pointing out so you can get your screwdriver on there to tighten the wire. Obviously. How am I going to get the wire to go from up here to down below the joists into the access area? Well, I'm going to use a fishing line. I'm going to stick the fishing line through the hole, and then when I get down there, I'm going to try to grab it with a magnet. So that's what I'm going to try to do, but even though this is a straight shot, if you ever do this, you'll find it's probably one of the most frustrating things you'll do, because the one does not want to go from one hole down to the other without quite a bit of fighting with it. Anyway, so here we go. Here we are down into the crawl space, and as you can see, it looks like there's a hole I might actually be able to use. Whoops. All that's in there is just the ground wire, which this is great because it looks like the electrician before came in here and grounded you can see the ground wire going down to the ground over there. So this place has all been grounded, which you don't run into a lot in these older houses. And depending on your job, what you're getting paid for, you may not actually go and ground a whole house just to put in a garbage disposal. So it's nice when these things are already taken care of. So anyway, now I'm going to take my magnet and try to find the fishing line. Oops. Well, I'm not sure how I managed this. I've only been messing with it for 5 minutes. And it looks like I'm pulling out usually, you can see I got the fishing line there. Well, anyways, you can see it coming out of the hole. Usually that's quite a bit more of a fight, but got it. Now I can tape my wire to the end of it. So sometimes when I do, and I got the end of the fishing hook here, I loop one of these little tiny wires around, and then you want to wrap in a way that's sort of like a torpedo, so when you go and pull on it, it sort of shoots back in like a missile. We are just getting ready to pull the wire up through. It's right there, it's getting hung up on my clamp. Oh, that's exactly why you want to wrap it up as such, because inevitably it gets hung up on stuff before it comes out. But here we are. This is where we need to be. Okay. So most of the time when drilling down into the crawl space or your access area, you like to drill a little pilot hole first to make sure you're not going into any floor joists, because that just makes it a lot harder to drill through. But first, before I do, I'm just going to go in the general area and check, make sure I don't have anything I can easily destroy down there, like a water line or something. So there are water lines and such down below there, but not immediately underneath the floor, so there's plenty of room to play with. Just as long as, you know, you're mostly careful. The deal is before, I can put my fishing line down there, and that way I can locate where the hole is a lot easier. It's a lot easier to find the hole if you have something dangling down underneath it. So, you can see my fishing line there, and hole right up there. You can tell, wasn't in any real danger, but you can tell I may, well, probably would have missed this pipe, but still, it's one of those things, got a little too aggressive, could have damaged something. There's a water line right there. So anyways, that's just why you want to be careful before overcommitting to things like that. Now, generally, I like to keep things neat, you know, and string them up nicely. So I'll go back and clamp this wire up after I've got it fished through. But this is one of those situations, I mean, there's already wires tacked underneath. If it's important to drill holes through the joist because something's covering it or for whatever reason, but this situation, I just don't really see the need for drilling holes through the joist to run the wires. You know, because one way to think about it is just each hole you drill in a joist, you just weaken everything that much more. So if it isn't really necessary, you know, I won't worry about it, kind of like in this situation. So I'll just string them up, tack them up right to the bottom, kind of like this guy. It's not a big deal. We've got our wire pulled up, and that's a big part of this project, because now we can have power to the dishwasher on his own circuit. So, making progress here. Just went to the store, bought a new fuse. Oddly enough, I found one right down at the local department store, Ace Hardware, the place that's really expensive. But at the same time, I try to shop as little as I can at Home Depot and Lowe's, those box stores, and maybe I'll even do a separate YouTube video on that at some point. But okay, I'm going to start wiring this thing in. And I like to keep the boxes clean, so I'll shave the insulation back and route, the wires kind of nicely in there to keep it from getting too dirty. And how do I shave the insulation on these? I usually just take a knife and I go gently down the center and cut all the way to the end, and then gently knife it close to where you want to terminate, or you want to open it up at. So obviously your hot wire goes to the fuse itself, and usually the neutral goes on one side and the ground goes on the other. Generally they go to separate buses. So this one, we've chosen to put all the neutrals over here, all the grounds on this side. As you can see up here, this green wire, the neutral and the ground are actually connected. So the neutral and the ground are separate up to this point. And then back at the main box, they actually become one. And the reason they're divided up this way is basically for safety. It's a way to deal with power surges and prevent electrical shock within the house. So it's just something to know that the ground and neutral are actually become the same thing at some point. Shut the power off to this box. I'm working with it live because there's a mom and a baby in the house, and they're utilizing the electricity. So I'm just trying to be careful as I can. I just wanted to point out, when you're working in these situations with live power, make sure there's good insulation on your tools. A lot of times even using insulated gloves as well. And then if you do cross a couple of points that you shouldn't, even if there is a zap, you'll be protected. And when stripping the wire ends like this, I use a good pair of strippers. That's the only way you're really going to do it. When connecting the hot wire, there's always a little crevice or a place where the wire just kind of fits into, and then once you get it into position, you tighten the screw, and you tighten them pretty tight, as tight as it'll go. Here's a place where I want to be a little extra careful, because there's a lot of places where I could accidentally contact this neutral to the wrong area. Anyways, trying to get, you can see me wiggling it there. The light's not totally good, but I'm working my way to get it over to that bus bar right there. First, I got this junction box to go in the hole that I carved out here, because that goes directly above the outlet, and plus I thought there was power there. But where this sits is directly behind the dishwasher, and also I didn't really know how I was going to get my pieces in and out of there, so I've changed my mind. And since the wire's coming straight up here, I'm going to go straight up here and just mount this box on the outside, and then just patch that hole back up after I fish the wire through. Realistically, this is under the kitchen cabinet and it's out of the way, so if you have exposed wires, it is no big deal. But technically, wires outside of the sheetrock wall aren't supposed to be exposed, so I like to cover this stuff up. And then so when I run this over to my other junction box, I'll use some of this stuff to stretch over that away to get my outlet for the garbage disposal. So I was going to tap into the power from this dedicated kitchen circuit here to feed the garbage disposal, and I was going to install the switch and kind of go this route, but I've changed my mind again because this has got one of the original metal boxes in it, and I just hate trying to fish these things out to install a new box in there. It's almost not worth the amount of trouble you put into it. So I'm changing directions. Since I got a 20 amp circuit, I'm going to put the garbage disposal on the dishwasher outlet, and I'm going to put a switch right here, which brings it closer to the sink anyways. So anyways, I'm off to the store to get the right outlet box to go in there, and then I'll put my junction box down under there, and looks like I have just enough wire and snake to reach all the way over. The little thing I forgot about with these Badger garbage disposals is they don't include a cord to go with the unit, and I've forgotten about this. It's kind of annoying actually. So anyways, what I decided to do in the dishwasher, I'm going to take the cord from the dishwasher and install that on the garbage disposal, and I'm just going to hardwire the dishwasher. Okay, to hardwire this, first thing I'm going to do is unscrew this plate that's here and remove this stuff, and then that gives me access to the little junction box. And whoops, wrong screwdriver. It's a star bit. Once again, remember the clamp. I'm going to put that underneath there because this is going in the box. First time wiring something up like this part, you know, any homeowner can do. Pretty self-explanatory. Black goes to the black, white goes to the white, and there's always, the green always goes to the green, which is ground, usually on the box itself. These together, always twist clockwise, because that is the way the wire nuts screw on. And you spin them on until they're essentially nice and snug. It looks something like that. You should be able to close, enough room to close your cover and put the screw back on. And that's the first step of getting this machine wired. If you're in a situation where your wires aren't color-coded, here's how to think about that. So a regular outlet, the hot is always on the right-hand side. The neutral is on the left, which would be white and black. I'm sorry, black always over here, which is hot, white on the left. And an easy way to tell if you're doing it the right way, you'll have a gold color for your black and your black and your hot, and you'll have a lighter silver color. This is upside down. Good grief. All right. So you have a black, goes to a gold color, and then see how this is more of a silver color? Your neutral, white wire, always goes to your silver. Your black hot always goes to the gold color. And so in this instance, I just sort of colored it myself to keep a make sure I get this right when I go and hook it up to the garbage disposal. These garbage disposals, they make this so you can just screw your wire clamp right into the hole. Okay. Just to show you, sometimes it can be a little tricky fishing the wire through there because it's got to go in. Oops. And it's got to get in the channel, so sometimes this can be a little bit of a fight, and I'm fighting with it right now. That was almost the hardest part of the whole job. Anyways, I got my color coordination there, the black. Just going to go to the black, and what I wanted to show you, in case like this, if you can't hand twist them, you know, you get a pair of pliers and you can twist your wires together that way before you put your wire nut on them. Okay, before I get too much further here, there's a little grody in there. I'm probably just going to do a light cleaning, then I'm actually just going to put just some leftover paint from another project. Just kind of slap a little bit on there, just to clean it up a little bit. It is a new install, so it'd be nice if things looked kind of nice under here. The family's out of the house here. I'm going to go ahead and make some noise and some dust. And first I'm going to cut out the hole where I want my on and off switch for the garbage disposal. And I'm going to use this flush cut tool. These things are great for cutting into drywall. And I'll be using it down here as well to cut out an opening for my wire to come through for my outlet. So that's all I wanted to do there. I just slapped it on with a little brush. This isn't an exercise in painting. It's just to slap it on there a little bit is all I wanted to do under here. So I might do another coat after I patch that piece in. When you want to put your brush away, but you're going to use it later, the best thing to do, put it in a Walmart bag. Just wrap your brush up in a plastic bag, and it will be good for literally months. Clean up from drywall mess is actually first just use a vacuum, and then after you get the majority of the dust up, then you go ahead and wipe it with a rag or whatever, however you want to clean it. But just remember, when you do use a vacuum, it dirties up your filter really fast, so you got to clean it fairly often. For those of you who aren't familiar with these are meant to go inside of drywall or wherever where there's not a stud. So in the instance where your wall's covered up and you don't have the option of putting an outlet box and nailing it to a stud, you find an open area where there are no obstructions, and these have, if I can get this thing to stand up, little tabs that when you tighten it, these pinch against the back side of the drywall. So make sure the tabs are closed first. After you get your hole routed out, you stick it in there, and then all you do is just take a screw and tighten it, and those tabs will pinch the box in. I have a pretty short run from my hole there up to the hole there, so I'm just going to fish it through by hand. How did I know there wasn't any obstructions from that point to that point? Well, to be honest, I didn't. I mean, generally, since studs run vertical every 16 inches, most of the time in between you got a clear shot, but sometimes there's cripples that get in the way, and then usually what that means is you got to try to snake a drill in there to get a drill through it. Which I've done before and can be a big hassle, but 80% of the time you got a clear shot if you're within that 16-inch span between the studs. So to connect your flexible conduit to the box, you use these types of clamps. They just slip right over it. I'm having to move my outlet box because I'm like 3 inches too short with my wire and flex conduit, so I'm going to move this guy a little lower so the back of the washing unit doesn't get hung up. And but I need all the room I can get, and this piece is actually still in the way. And little funny things that happen. There's still one more screw I got to get out, and this screw is the tightest damn thing. So I've been fighting with this for gosh knows how long. And then, so I got to cut this back to that point right there to kind of maximize the room. So not quite done in here yet. So So once again, in situations like these where you have to get something like this off and you have to cut it, flush cut tool is great, or the oscillating saws. This one's just a piece of junk Harbor. I'm not really a big fan of Harbor tools, but like a lot of us, half the time it's all we can afford. And a battery-powered skill saw isn't a bad idea for hard to get to places like this. I'm at this point, I'm gonna go ahead and patch my piece in. Just all-purpose joint compound is all you need. And this is some old stuff that's been around for a while. Generally what I do with, you know, especially little patches like this, I just add a little water to it, and that way you can keep it around for a long time. So before I start patching it in, I'm just going to put a drywall screw in it to hold it in place. And then I forgot my mudding knives today, but I'm just going to put it in. I got a putty knife here, good enough for this. It will look something like that, and wait for it to dry before you know, sand it down a touch and put another coat on if you're concerned about it. Now, like there, do I need to put fiberglass mesh on it to tape it? And it makes it feel better, but once again, this is one of those situations where I'm not really worried about that. You know, the taping is primarily for preventing cracks, and so I just plastered some stuff up on here. I didn't worry about the fiberglass mesh for this. I am talking quietly again, but here's a couple of things to think about. So we got our power source, and this wire is white, and this is coming over to the outlet where I'm going to plug the dishwasher in. Okay, so we got the white wire coming over, and then the yellow wire right here coming up to the switch. Okay, so white wire coming over, yellow wire going straight up. So how this works is, in case you're curious, we got a switch here. This is not a situation of a hot and neutral. This guy here is essentially one loop. This is one long hot wire that loops around. So we get the power that goes into this outlet, then goes up to this box, and this guy is essentially a gatekeeper. And all he does is allow the power to continue. So this is a loop. These are one continuous line, and the power goes in, and he says, "None shall pass, not unless you answer three questions correctly." And he'll ask this guy, "What is your favorite color?" And if he says green, this will flip on, and the power can continue on back down. And then that power will continue back down and feed in to this outlet. That's how you control this outlet from up here. These GFIs are a little tricky. You can't just put the neutral over here and the hot over here, but they call it the line. The line goes in here. If this was going to feed another receptacle, in other words, if power was going out, the power has to be plugged in here. So in other words, if you plug your power source into the bottom, the GFI won't work. So something to keep in mind about these GFIs. Power goes into the line, and they call the bottom side the load which goes out. So hopefully that makes sense. Up here, could we have power and an outlet? Yeah, of course we can. We could have all three of these things if we wanted, but since I'm running the garbage disposal and the dishwasher on the same circuit, I don't want anything else to be drawn off that circuit. So this is just going to control the garbage disposal outlet only and once again, the dishwasher is going to be hardwired in. I don't know how to hook these up. What you do is you just strip the ends off these a little bit till you get some copper wire. You bend a little loop, and then you just wrap the loop around your screw and tighten it up. Now, generally on light switches, if they're running lights, there's a lighter gauge wire. This is 12 gauge, but if you're running 14, which is lighter, you can just plug these like these. Well, these don't have them, but a lot of them you can just, bad light, you can plug them right directly in without having to bend the little loop on a lot of outlets. But pretty simple. That's all that happens there. Try to show that a little better here. So you can see these don't have to bend them. They go straight in like that and tighten them. Explain that again now that it's all hooked up. So, got our power source coming over to this box, to this outlet, a GFI. They call them GFIs, which stands for ground fault interrupters. Basically, they just sense moisture, or they're just sensitive, so if there's something like moisture, they'll immediately trip to kill the power. So I got the power source, but I got the hot wire connected to the other hot wire of the yellow wire, which is going up to the shutoff switch. So here, that wire is coming into here. It's asking permission from this switch to send power back down this line. And then, if yes, the power continues, which I've got marked black, because he's actually a hot, and he comes back down, and then comes back to the other side of the outlet. So, as you can see, this is a crazy difficult area to try to work in. Just not quite enough room to get your body in here. One more thing about GFI outlets. So anywhere where there's water, so in your bathrooms or kitchens, it's recommended that these are installed. It's the safest way to prevent unnecessary shock or any other kind of accidents. That's why you see these in bathrooms and kitchens most of the time. I have changed my mind about something here. The wire they sent with this washer was a very heavily insulated wire like this one, and I had some of this, which was part of an extension cord that I had used. But I had some of this in my bin too. I was reading in the manual, and they recommended heavily insulated 12 gauge wire. And you can tell by looking at it, there's, well, the copper gauge on this is definitely quite a bit bigger than this. So I thought, since they recommended it, flexible copper 12 gauge wire, and since I had a spare chunk, I'm going to go ahead and install it with that. If you don't have one of these clamps, like I installed in here, if you got the dishwasher kit, they have these two that go in. So if you got the kit, you can that just slips in the hole there too. And I might actually switch that out to save myself a clamp. We'll see. I just went ahead and cut some of this 1/8" board just to lay down on here, mainly to flush up against the old floor so the feet don't get hung up when you slide it in and out. That's all that was about. Hey, dishwasher's in. Now I'm getting ready to hook him up. Luckily, was actually pretty light, so I could just carry him in. So I'm going to hook this up and slide him in there and give him a try out. Okay, first step to hooking this guy up is getting this brass elbow on the water inlet here. As you can see, got the dishwasher turned on its back. It's got a rubber bushing on it. It's a plastic, so it doesn't have to be crazy, crazy tight. It should be good and snug, but you don't want it so tight that you're going to bust it. And then you put your hose on it. Same thing, it's got a rubber gasket, so it just needs to be really nice and snug but not overly tight, because you'll wreck the bushing if you get it overly tight. Generally a wrench is a better deal for this. I want my hose to go the other way. I'm going to loosen up this clamp and swing this around so I can get the hose pointing in the right direction. The manual as well. Manual. So if you got wood countertops, you got 2 brackets. You put them in here. You make sure that they go in this way, and then once you slide them into these little grooves, you bend these up with the pliers to keep them locked in. If you got granite countertops, as it says in the directions, then you use the slots on the side and you try to attach it to a wood surface. But we got wood countertops here, and so the way we slide that in to where we want it. Whoops. And then what I'm trying to show you here is when you get to where you want it, you got these score lines, and you can break these off so they're not sticking out. And then obviously what you do is you open the door so you can screw from underneath in there. So, and then what I did is I drilled a hole before so I could get my screw started in there, tighten them up. Same with on that side. And then I will probably level the legs right after I put them in to keep them from moving around. To do to level the legs, just put a wrench under these feet and turn, imagine you turn clockwise to raise it, and in the back too. So if you don't have this kind of space to work in, obviously you have to pull the dishwasher out and adjust the legs before you slide it back in. Put your wrench on the top part too. Spin it around if that's easier. Maybe that's actually what you're supposed to do. Okay, this is cool. These just slides on to these, and then the way you tighten them is with a set screw, and they give you the little tool to do that. So that makes that kind of convenient. So on this, I found inside an extension drain hose. So if you run short on your hose, essentially, so what I'm trying to show you is this end would go into the other piece. A little clamp on them to keep them up there. Now I got the water turned on to the valve, got the hose connected to the garbage disposal, got everything. I'm just getting ready to go turn the breaker on and try it out. Okay, so we now have a working garbage disposal, and our dishwasher is running. So far everything is doing what's supposed to. No leaks have sprouted up yet, and the family is already making use of the new kitchen. Yeah! The last phase of this is to make a little cabinet that goes into the side area. Haven't quite decided how I'm going to trim this out yet, but that's the last stage of the game here.